Thank you, Hilde, for inviting me. I'm proud to be here and to present Diversitas, working so long for Diversitas now. So I try to present you the large landscape where IPBES was born and will interact with. So here is the landscape we are in, and I'll lead you through. First, I'll show you the research, how science is organized on a global level, and then go through observation, assessment, and policy, and show you all these roles for IPBES. So Diversitas, that's for those who don't know Diversitas, it's the international program for biodiversity science, and those are the sponsors. It's mainly ICSU, and the mission is to promote biodiversity science and to provide the scientific knowledge for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. Diversitas will be merged with two other global environmental change programs this year into a new body, organizing body, which is the Future Earth, that was launched at Rio +20 by the Science and Technology Alliance for Global Sustainability. And the advantage of Future Earth is now that it's not only built on science institutions such as ICSU or the International Social Science Council, but it also involves end users such as UNEP or UNESCO, and also funding agencies, which is ICFA or the Belmont Forum. So all these are launched Future Earth, and Future Earth will build on this legacy of the global environmental change programs. So here you can see the timeline. VCRP was funded already in the 80s. Those are the mainly advisors, or this is the science basis for IPCC. Then IGBP, IHDP, and Diversitas will then merge into Future Earth. And there was already once an attempt in 2001 to bring these programs closer together to do cross-cutting issues such as carbon or water, and that was called the Earth System Science Partnership. So what is the mission of Future Earth? It should provide societies with the knowledge required to face the risks posed by global environmental change and to build global sustainability. And there were some societal challenges identified which Future Earth should respond in the next 10 years. It's set for 10 years. So one challenge, for example, is to feed the 9 billion people within sustainable boundaries, to add knowledge on valuing and protecting ecosystem services and biodiversity, and dealing with climate change and so on. And the new approach of Future Earth is that it should be a more integrated and interdisciplinary research than so far. Human dimensions was in one program, geobiosphere research was in IGBP, biodiversity was more in Diversitas. And the other new approach is that not only is the co-design idea, so it's end users and scientists sit together and design the research projects. So what does Diversitas and hopefully Future Earth do in the future? It not only provides the common international framework for collaborative research, and it's building scientific networks. It provides a think tank on new projects and ideas. So it's mainly about coordination of scientists. But it's also performing synthesis of knowledge from many different single studies. Then, and that's my main point here, is it's guiding and facilitating these major global initiatives. I will introduce you. Yeah, IPBES is one of those, and GeoBon is the other. I'll present you later. And it also presents science in these policy fora. So Diversitas was involved in SAPSTA and other policy fora. So it adds actually value to national research. So, in my role, just to introduce myself a bit more, I was coordinating one of those Diversitas networks. It's a cross-cutting network on mountain biodiversity research. And on the left you see the 3 core projects of Diversitas, and all these projects are transferred directly to Future Earth. And they will then interact under this U structure more closely. One first thing is the fast track initiatives. There was a call on those facilitating interactions between the already existing global environmental change projects. And then Diversitas has also national committees, and the Swiss Biodiversity Forum I'm also working with is one of those national committees. And we now merge with another national committee of IGBP and others in Switzerland to a Future Earth national committee. And my job is to coordinate the IPBES activities such as Hilde does in Belgium. So the scientific community was really supportive of IPBES. Actually, I think it was very crucially facilitated by scientists, not just at the very early beginning in these consultative processes, the Paris meeting in 2005, but we also published a lot of papers in journals and did presentations and side events in conferences. One, for example, in Planet Under Pressure in London. Diversitas was also having a e-newsletter on IPBES. The other support of IPBES was contributing to the formal process. So again, establishing the mechanism, the IMOSEP, integrating the Millennium Assessment Follow-up Initiative, bringing those together, which then finally formed IPBES. We also prepared for plenaries, organized these workshops, the engagement forums. Diversitas presented the scientific community in governmental meetings, contributed to the negotiations, and you see here in the pictures some side events Diversitas was leading. And not last but not least, there are also many scientists from Diversitas involved in IPBES. We have like 4 or 5 members of the MEP are also in the science committee of Diversitas. And then we have Anne-Larie Gaudry, who was the deputy director of Diversitas, who is now the IPBES secretary. Diversitas was also crucial in providing the science and conducting activities for IPBES. Doing those first 4 studies, you probably have seen the biodiscovery core group already worked on biodiversity scenarios, which will then be crucial for the work of IPBES. I think one of the major achievements of IPCC at the beginning was to adopt common models and scenarios, and that's still work to be done in the biodiversity realm. So work on that is already ongoing. And then the stakeholder engagement was which goes beyond the Diversitas community, goes beyond the science community. There was a lot of work done here, chairing the stakeholder engagement strategy meetings at IPBES 1 and so on. Okay, so now that was about the research part, which most of you probably are in this science policy landscape. I'll briefly present you the observation bit of that landscape. We need observation for IPBES. There is a need for long-term trends, the data delivery for science, so for research purposes, but also for modeling and for scenarios. Observations are crucial. So, and the entry point for IPBES is probably through this task force on data and knowledge, which was recently formed. So DIVERSITAS and NASA were in charge of designing this biodiversity observation network of GeoBon. It's one of the 9, it's covering one of the 9 areas of geo. It has societally benefit areas. One of it is biodiversity. So GeoBon is covering the biodiversity observations. It's a global partnership which should help to collect all these different observations going on in the world to provide a common framework and just to know what's going on and to fill the gaps which we didn't fill so far. So it should gather but also share the information on biodiversity and provide also tool for data integration and analysis. I'll show you right now. There was one product already which will be, I think, really useful for IPBES by defining the essential biodiversity variables. That's also in IPCC, the essential climatic variables were really crucial to facilitate comparative research and also using the same variables all over the world across studies. So there was already papers published on those, and there's a task force in GeoBon working on these variables. So because biodiversity is so complicated, you need common variables so you can talk about the same things across the globe. And it focuses on primary measurements. GeoBon also did work for the Convention on Biodiversity, doing a report on what the current observations we have already, how they can serve to implement the 20 targets of the CBD. So now I'll go straight to the policy part. IPBES we already covered. So we know a lot about IPBES now. So policy is actually the end users of IPBES. So policy is organized in these multilateral agreements and policy fora. So the most relevant are, of course, the Convention on Biodiversity, but there is also Ramsar on wetlands and CITES, other MEAs related to biodiversity, and they should take up the results of IPBES, of course, and implement it directly in their strategy. But there are, if you look on a broader scope, the SDGs are also, DIVERSITAS did a lot of work on including biodiversity in the new SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Another broader scope is the Convention of the Law of the Sea, covering the high sea, which is beyond the areas of natural jurisdiction not covered by the CBD. That would be great to have them in the boat and to take up IPBES results. Then, of course, we have these UN organizations, the 4 already mentioned so many times this morning: UNEP, UNESCO, FAO, and UNDP, who are actually the ones organizing IPBES. But there is also the Trade and the Health Organization, which should take up IPBES results. So, of course, then observers, which are at the moment observers, IUCN, WWF, and others, can use the results of IPBES for their work. Here is just to show you, that's the new document which is currently, which will be discussed at Substa 18 on IPBES in the convention, just exactly laying out how requests to IPBES can be facilitated through the convention. So there is a tight relationship between the convention and IPBES. Also, Henrik mentioned that the chair is an observer to the bureau, so there are linkages, tight linkages between IPBES and CBD. So, last but not least, I'd like to link to other assessment. My previous speaker already talked about one of the assessments I weren't even aware of. The main point here is to avoid duplication, and so duplication of efforts. As my previous speaker's main point was, there is a FAO assessment on pollination now that we have this this World Impact Assessment on pollination, and IPBES should take all these assessments into account with, for example, this new fast-track initiative on pollination. There are other assessments, such as the Global Environmental Outlook from UNEP, that's published on a 5-year interval, and the next will be due in 2017. But there is one chapter on biodiversity, and they should, of course, then take IPBES assessments into account. The very close assessment is the Global Biodiversity Outlook by the CBD. The next one it's almost finished. GBO4 will be presented in October at COP12. That one might then turn into the global assessment of IPBES, or they might decide that they keep a small one, just focusing on how the targets are implemented, but those are for sure closely linked. And as I mentioned, the FAO assessments, which cover also overlapping with IPBES tasks. And to also avoid duplication, or to use the IPCC, I mean all the knowledge we have from IPCC, many experts actually are shared within between IPBES and IPCC, and especially on modeling and scenarios, we should take the IPCC as a model to develop those, because those will be the basis for future predictions. So thanks for your attention, and I'm happy to take questions.